Nick Paganella, Veterans Corner. I videotaped this event, and I hope that you find it interesting, educational, and historical, as I did. Well, today we're here at the Common at Hopkinton, Massachusetts.
Okay. Hi, good morning. What a wonderful morning it is. I'm Raunak Hussain. I'm the director of the library, and we love to have this program brought to our town. And May is the perfect month to celebrate and honor our World War II veterans and
all military family.
Actually, all military family, and also to relive the time and how it was, and see all this interesting information that we normally wouldn't have seen it. So to have a bus and have that information is fantastic.
How long have you been at the library?
5 years.
And where do you come from originally?
You mean natively where I was born?
Yeah.
Oh, I actually, I was born in Bangladesh. It's a long way from here. I've been in this country all my life. And I love being here. And actually I'm from Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut in the 70s with my parents. Library is one of the sponsors of this program,
okay.
And I am here to just stop by to see how the program is going and how many people are visiting, and also to experience it myself. It's an interesting thing, and mobile museum is something very fascinating.
Very nice talking to you today.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed the exhibit.
Yes, it's a wonderful day.
Okay, let's get back to you, Colonel.
Okay.
How long have you been in the Veterans organization here now?
I've been involved with the Veterans Organization for about 5 years. Currently, I'm the chairman of the group. The group is responsible for putting on the Memorial Day Parade, the Veterans Day Dinner, and on a monthly basis, we perform a ceremony that is done throughout the world at about 6,000 communities. It's called the TAPS Vigil. So at 7:15 on the first Sunday of every month, the TAPS Vigil is conducted at local time, 7:15, wherever you are in the world. Take a look in your community and see if you can't join in.
Yeah, I'm very much aware of that. In fact, I've come down here and visited you and partaken in these ceremonies. It's very, very well done. And also, I'd like to commend the Hopkinton veterans and the community for doing this steadfastly 12 months of the year for the last 4 or 5 years anyway.
Just like the post office, rain, snow, sleet, or even good weather.
Yeah, well, nice talking to you today. And thank you very much for talking on camera.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay.
Today we've got Irving, who's come to us from the Minneapolis area, and he's been touring all through the country, representing an organization called
Traces,
which is a private museum that he will explain. And he's brought with him this museum on wheels, and he's here for the day.
Well, Mr. Irving, how long have you been on the road with the bus?
I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been as far north as the Canadian border, as far south as the Mexican border, as far west as New Mexico, all the Gulf Coast states down to Florida, all the East Coast states, and of course the Midwest, which is where we're based. So we've done 33 states. We've been to between 2,500 and 3,000 towns, and somewhere between 250 and 300,000 people have come through the exhibits.
Do you drive by yourself?
Yes, sir, I do.
So you're a lone ranger then?
Yes, yeah. Well, I've been a vagabond basically all my life. Now I get paid for it.
Well, how long have you been doing this now?
I've been doing it for 3 years.
Okay, and how long do you think you're going to hang in there?
Well, there's a fall tour that we're setting up, and then we're scheduled for a 2-year tour of Germany starting next year. and I'll be going with the bus if we can find a sponsor to ship the bus to Germany. We have a 2-year tour of Germany scheduled.
I was taking pictures on the other side of your bus, and I noticed that you got some credible donators to your cause.
Yes.
And that's enlightening.
Yes,
Okay.
it's lots of people were very helpful when we got off the ground with this.
Let's take a walk over here to the Geneva Convention here. I noticed that the whole copy of the...
Not all of it, but a great deal of it. One part that's not there is that they have to be returned at the end of hostilities. All prisoners have to be returned to their homelands. The war in Europe ended in May of '45. The POWs, once they got here, were put to work because all our men were gone fighting the war. There was a labor shortage. So the fall harvest still needed to be done of '45, so we really didn't start sending the prisoners back until November and December of '45, all of '46. The last prisoner left in '47. And let's see, Boston Harbor, here's the listing of all the camps. Fort Devens was a base camp. It held up to 5,000 men. The bus itself is the overview of their experience. The panels on the right tell how they were captured and brought here. This is a map of all the camps in the Midwest. We've been doing this for 7 years. The first 5 years we just went to the Midwest. We're based in St. Paul, Minnesota, the museum is. So we were a Midwest-centric museum. When we decided to go national, we discovered that we couldn't afford to change the map. So we're stuck with a map of the Midwest. There were 660 camps all over the United States, and unfortunately we couldn't get a map of all the camps in the U.S. 220 camps here in the Midwest. There are 150 camps on the East Coast.
I want to ask you, who does the maintenance on the bus when you're on the road?
Well, I do to some extent, and then truck stops and service stations.
And they kind of help you out too?
They'll help us out,
They know
right.
that you're,
We're
what the
nonprofit,
mission is.
money-losing museum.
Okay. Why don't we go inside the bus and maybe you can talk to me a little bit
Sure.
about something there.
Okay.
Okay.
This gentleman here was 17 years old when he was captured. He's 5'4", weighed 118 pounds. Just a tiny little kid. And we kept meticulous records of every POW that we brought here. We kept them in a building in St. Louis that burned up in the 60s. And we lost all the records. So people will come to me and they'll ask me, I had an uncle, I had a cousin that was a POW, can you tell me what camp he might be in? Can't help him. All the records are gone. This is an interesting,
Excuse me.
this shows what life was like in the camps. This camp had a billiard table. Just about every camp in the country had a band. The YMCA, the Red Cross, and the Quakers brought in musical instruments for the POWs. And art. Art was a very big wood carving, watercolors, oils, charcoals, pencil drawings. I have this. This is a home in Virginia that a POW did, and a gentleman brought me this charcoal paint, replica, and it's a beautiful piece. Back in the day, fruit used to be delivered in wooden crates, and this carving is the end piece from a wooden crate. And this, unfortunately, is a piece that keeps falling down. Oh. But this is a wood carving, a tray that a POW did, and this was inlaid. Okay. In north, south, east, and west. At this particular camp, they had a billiard table. They had pianos, of course, instruments. This stage rotated. It pivoted so they could change scenes from one to another without wasting any time. They dug the orchestra pit and put on musicals.
Where is this located?
This was Hearne, Texas. No, I'm sorry, Camp Campbell in Kentucky. Beg your pardon, Camp Campbell. And I was told at Camp Campbell the POWs built a still, and their moonshine was the best liquor around, and they used to sell it to the guards. Yeah. And they could go to, they would take classes and be able to get college credit when they got back to Germany. Civics classes, English classes, they had architectural classes, they had art classes, English, art, architecture, and engineering.
All those classes were here in the States?
At camps in the States.
Big difference.
Yes, yes.
Big difference.
Why?
Well, we had classes there in Germany too. I'm in, this gentleman was one of our POWs held in Germany, and he was a photographer in the Signal Corps. And when he got to his camp in Germany, he traded 8 packs of cigarettes to a German guard for a camera and film, and then took photos of the camp. And that camp had a band. They put on musicals, and there's and then we also had classes too. All of his photos are now in the Smithsonian. He had a pair of paratrooper pants that were very baggy, and he poked a hole in the pocket, slipped his camera in, and would walk around the campground secretly taking photos. And then he hollowed out one of the legs of his cot, and he would stick the film canisters up there so he wouldn't be caught.
What was his name?
Angelo Spinelli.
And he was an American soldier?
American
prisoner of war?
Yes, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. Yes, he was in the Signal Corps and captured in North Africa and taken to Stalag 3B in Germany.
What is your name, sir?
Irving Kellman, IRVING KELLMAN. And I'm the bus driver / tour guide.
You go all over the country with this?
We've been doing this for 7 years. We've been to 33 states, Canadian border to the Mexican border, as far west as New Mexico, all the Gulf Coast states to Florida, and all the East Coast states, and of course all the Midwest. We've been to between 2,500 and 3,000 towns, and between 250 and 300,000 people have come through the exhibits.
Oh, who sponsors this, sir?
The Traces Center for History and Culture. We're a World War II history museum based in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're a small, nonprofit, money-losing museum.
So, how do you...
We grants. We work off of grants, donations, and our hosts pay for us to come. So the Hopkinton Library and the Friends of the Library and the Historical Society and the Veterans group here paid for us to come.
Most documentaries about prisoners of war tell of the extremes. Extreme hardships faced by POWs from many wars in many nations. And during World War II, there's no denying that many of the 130,000 American prisoners of war faced grim conditions, cruelty, and even death at the hands of their captors. Despite these undeniable facts, not all prisoner of war camps were unbearable. This is the story of POWs from Germany who were held in nearly every state in our nation, including Iowa. Prisoners of war in Iowa? Yes, by the thousands. Algona, Iowa, which then had a population of about 5,000, was a POW hub, which could hold 3,000 POWs and was responsible for distributing 10,000 prisoners to more than 30 branch camps in Iowa, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. Obscured by time and fading memories, this story has resurfaced in recent years, in part because of an organization called Traces, run by a man named Michael Lewick Trams.
Everyone has a conference packet, right?
Michael, an author, lecturer, and historian, followed his Quaker roots to study the social impact of World War II. He has immersed himself in the study of relations between Iowans and Germans who have World War II connections, conducting personal interviews with former POWs in Germany.
I think Iowans in general were very generous to the Germans, very hospitable, tolerant, especially in a time of war. If you consider that their own sons were off fighting in Europe and in Asia, it's quite a feat to be about to lose a loved one, potentially, and yet to receive, quote, the enemy and treat him with kindness.
Michael found in the POWs a warmth toward Iowa and the people they met here. The families of POWs expressed curiosity about those times and this place. The feeling seemed so strong that in 2002, Traces set up a guided tour so the Germans could touch that history and share their stories with Americans.
The work here was okay and they were treated well. At this time I came here to know where my father once lived and worked, and I hope I can understand my father a little more, and maybe he gets more rememberings when I'm back.
The tour included a stop at one of the most unusual prison camps, one of the few that still stands. It is the Wildwood Golf Course Clubhouse in Charles City. Local history buff Tracy Sweet remembers when the POWs were housed in this building.
When I was 6 years old, my mother brought me out here. I do remember I have some very vivid memories. There was barbed wire, and I do remember seeing the soldiers milling around. But some friends of mine remember that they were building houses. The prisoners were in Charles City, and her parents said, "Don't go over there. There's German prisoners over there." So that's right away where the kids went to see them. And everybody in the town got along with them. I never heard anything bad about anything that happened. They were good workers. They were clean. I heard that this floor in this room, they kept it so clean that they had to refinish it afterwards because they wore the varnish right off the floor by keeping it clean.
In Algona, once the main hub of POW activity, the barracks are all gone. They were cleared away to make room for an airport. But local historians have been collecting stories from those times. When the German families visited, historians invited 94-year-old Captain Raymond Glatfelder to reminisce with them.
Well, I remember being stationed here from June 1944 until the prisoners of war all went home, and I went home also. Approximately 17 months.
Captain Glatfelder spent his days in Algona as the adjutant or manager of the camp.
I'll tell you, I know the prisoners of war were treated well, they were fed well, probably better than they were at home. They were treated real good.
Treatment of the prisoners by Americans is a sensitive issue. The military was determined to treat prisoners according to the Geneva Convention rules, providing them with food, clothing, medical care, and work and recreational opportunities. In addition, Iowa was and is widely populated by German immigrants. In the 2000 census, more than half of the state's citizens still claimed German ancestry. Back in the 1940s, many Iowans could still speak German and did their best to make their former countrymen in the POW camps feel at home. But at the same time, this friendliness was overshadowed by concerns about how American prisoners, many of them Iowans, were being treated overseas.
It wasn't just out of altruistic motivations that we took such good care of the Germans. We thought, and I think it was accurate, that if the United States treated German POWs well, that word would get back to Berlin through the Red Cross base in Switzerland, and that Hitler would treat American POWs better than otherwise would be the case. And that is actually what happened. American POWs in Nazi Germany were treated much better than Soviet POWs or even British or French.
Here in the Midwest, the imprisoned Germans were safe, but lonely and far from their homes and families. Many of them welcomed a chance to work in nearby factories, fields, forests, and farms. According to Michael Lewick Trams, after a short period of adjustment, Midwesterners were glad to have the help.
Numerous Algonians were frightened that the POWs would escape. They'd commit crimes or attack the population. At first there was resistance to putting the base camp there. Once the people realized how much money was going to be generated by Camp Algona, that changed. And after the war, the government wrote a report. And indeed, locally, millions of dollars were generated in economic activity. The men harvested a lot of crops. They saved some crops, especially pea crops up in Minnesota.
Retired Senator Burl Preeb was in his late 20s when he hired some of the Algona prisoners of war for help on his farm.
They were excellent carpenters, very good with stonework and carpenter, and so I had some buildings up on our farm that really needed work on. So we'd go down every morning and pick up 4 of them, and then they'd work, and we'd always feed them at noon, and there was always a guard came with them. And these people were really really nice to have around. They didn't bother, and they worked good and all that. And the only one I can remember the name of was Fritz Cloping. And he picked our little girls up and carried them around after he'd ate at noon out in, we had a nice lawn. And he'd walk around and kind of talk to them. And he said, I've got a little sister in Germany, the same age, but he said the town has been bombed. So he said, I really don't know whether they're alive or not. The thing that impressed me was the 3 of them, they never wanted a war. They were forced into the war because of Hitler and because of his SS troops.
The prisoners were paid for their work in prison scrip, money printed just for use in camps, and they used it to buy everything from snacks and cigarettes to just about anything they could want. The International YMCA made sure that the prisoners were given access to entertainment, and with many hours on their hands, the prisoners took up expressing themselves through the arts. Together, the German families, Iowa historians, and traces have collected several thousand photos and artifacts that show how the prisoners lived and what they designed. The Traces exhibit, with displays organized by Virginia Cooper of the Muscatine Art Center, has been touring the Midwest. There are journals, some complete with cartoons, drawings, and paintings. This prisoner's drawing is captioned, "Despite everything, humor." Some prisoners would buy paint supplies and spend time making scenes of home and family. Many a portrait, like this one of the Camp Algona chaplain, T.K. Herbener, was traded for a carton of cigarettes. Woodworking was a common hobby also, and both Nazi and American symbols found their way into the wood. In some camps, it became tough to keep the broom handles from disappearing and later reappearing as game board pieces. Then there were the performing arts. The prisoners of Camp Algona took to the stage and performed in plays that were written by their fellow thespians. Some were fantastically staged and costumed. Many prisoners bought musical instruments and organized groups, performing all kinds of music, from popular to classical. In Algona, a prisoner named Edward Kaib made a lasting contribution to the town. He and other prisoners paid for and carved a massive nativity scene. The scene was completed in 1945, and after the war ended was left as a gift for Algona, where it is still open to the public every December. It's a rare major artwork, unique in that it was created by POWs of their own volition.
In a final analysis,
after collecting more than 75 hours of POW stories from Germans and Iowans, plus gathering 1,500 artifacts and holding numerous cultural exchanges and forums, Michael Lewick Trams says his understanding of the social costs of war has deepened.
There are many lessons For me, the most overriding lesson, the most important lesson, is that there is no such thing as an enemy. There are friends we haven't yet met. And that human beings ultimately don't really want to kill each other. And they certainly don't want to be killed by one another. But they're forced into the army, they're forced to carry arms and to kill, either in terms of self-defense or in many cases in offense. And those wars have such deep lasting, they leave such deep lasting scars, and those wounds last for decades.
And at the same time, Michael has learned that when people are treated with courtesy, despite the constraints of war, the effects of friendship are lasting as well.
The POWs were able to form friendships here, and those Germans have never forgotten us. And they were allies. They became friends of us, of the United States, for the rest of their lives.
A modest little building in a quiet Algona park holds a charming piece of history from a time of war. It is a nativity scene built by prisoners of war held here during World War II. While this collection of half-life-size figures of the Christmas scene, or creche, is beautiful as a work of art, it is also a lasting monument to the humane treatment and friendship Iowans gave to the prisoners during one of our nation's darkest hours.
The nativity scene, of course, was built by German prisoners of war back during World War II when they were incarcerated at Camp Algona. And so we have been keepers of the scene as the Methodist Men's Club since 1958.
To the uninitiated, the thought of prisoners of war creating a huge work of art might sound incongruous, and letting the enemy make artwork might sound extravagant to some Americans who suffered through those years of collecting food stamps and scrimping for the war effort. But to the leaders of Camp Algona, where German prisoners were shipped by the thousands, humane treatment based on the Geneva Convention was of utmost importance. And they felt keeping prisoners busy was an important way of keeping order in the camps. The prisoners, known then as POWs, were allowed to earn camp money by working at local farms and factories. This money could then be used to buy the art supplies they needed, such as paints, papers, and even musical instruments. Some prisoners would write, direct, and star in plays. Others tried drawing and painting to while away the hours. One of these prisoners, a young man named Edward Kaib, had been an architect back in Germany. This is one of the paintings he made while in the camp. He, like many of the prisoners, also had an interest in carving.
Edward Kaib, at Christmas time in 1944, was a very lonely man and missing home, just as we all would be at Christmas time. And so he chose to build a small nativity set in 1940 for the 1944 Christmas. After that was built, he then visited with the camp commander Lobdell and they decided that it would be okay for him and some of his fellow workers to build this nativity scene during the next year. And so by Christmas time of 1945, they had completed this work of art. When the war ended, they had no way of taking it back, and Algona was very impressed with it and asked if it could remain here, and Mr. Kide said that yes, it could on some conditions, that it never be sold, that it never leave Algona, that there never be an admission charge, and that it be open at Christmas time for people to view it. There's none other like it in the world. You're not going to find a work of art like this anywhere.
Everybody knows about Japanese Americans. 11,000 Americans of German descent were also put in internment camps. But the bus itself tells the story of German prisoners of war, men captured in the battlefield and brought here to the States and brought to Massachusetts. We're taking the bus to Germany next year, so we decided not to change out these signs. We wanted to tell this story to the Germans too.
Yeah, I never heard of this.
Yes, it's.
I'm sure everybody, it's the same way.
Yes, exactly. Ellis Island was an internment camp for German American citizens. Ellis Island is now a museum. Doesn't tell a word, say a word that it was an internment camp. So it's been pretty much hidden.
Right, right.
What is your name, sir?
Michael Bolson.
Do you live in Hopkinton?
I live right here in Hopkinton, yeah.
How did you hear about this exhibit?
I just drove by.
Oh, well, thank you.
How long have you been living in Hopkinton?
51 years.
Oh, wow, you might as well step right aside and really get your eye opener on all this.
Yeah, I'd like to do that, yeah.
The back half of the bus is a video theater. The video replays itself every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. The front half of the bus is the actual museum. There were 660 prisoner of war camps throughout the United States. As you go in and you turn to your left, you'll see a listing of the 11 camps here in Massachusetts. Boston Harbor and Virginia Beach, Virginia were the two main disembarkation points. Tens of thousands of men came through Boston. Fort Devens was a base camp. It held about 5,000 men. It was huge. And it was also the feeder camp for the base camps that were here in the northeast. Base camps held thousands of men. There were 110 of those. Branch camps were where the men went to work. All our men were gone fighting the war. There was a labor shortage, so we used the POWs to fill that labor gap. So wherever work needed to be done, they'd set up a branch camp. And Devon was the feeder for the branch camps in the northeast.
Yeah, because I know Cushing Hospital down here. They work there, I know that.
Yeah, they built roads, they built bridges. They cleared the land for the Calvin Reservoir.
Here, I see that you've got a lot of
The sponsors. These are our sponsors. These are the folks that helped put the bus together 7 years ago when we first started.
And I see you got the Amendment 5 here.
The Fifth Amendment. This is dealing with why we shouldn't put people in internment camps. But we did. We basically tossed out the Constitution for our own citizens. At the same time that we were extending the hand of friendship to our enemies, we are putting our own citizens behind barbed wire. Japanese Americans, every Japanese American was put in an internment camp. There were 30 million Americans of German descent. 11,000 Americans of German descent were put in detention camps, the internment camps. So who was taken as the Germans was basically very arbitrary.
And it says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise an infamous crime unless a presentiment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Well, it says it all, doesn't it?
Yes, and they did lose their property. As you know about the Japanese Americans, they lost their property, they lost their businesses, so did the German Americans. The Japanese Americans have been apologized to by Congress. Congress has voted them to compensation. They've never allocated the money to pay for that compensation, but at least they've been voted for the compensation. German American citizens have never been apologized to, nor has any money ever been voted for compensation for the loss of their businesses and the loss of their properties. 1,000 survived. 90%. No commander of a German prisoner of war camp was tried or convicted of war crimes. Every commander of a Japanese camp was. Hitler thought 10% of the United States was Jewish. So he had a standing order, 10% of all American prisoners of war should be sent to concentration camps. No commander of a POW camp in Germany ever obeyed that order. None of our men were ever sent to concentration camps. Americans of Jewish descent were treated no differently than any other American POW.
So 81,000 out of 90,000
What's
came
your
back.
name, sir?
Jim Rose.
And you live right here in Hopkinton?
I do.
I noticed you have on your shirt the United States Air Force Association.
Right.
You're a member?
Right.
And you're a member of and you were in the Air Force.
Right.
What years were you in there?
From 1972 to 1996.
Yep.
Oh,
Wow, you made a career of it.
Right.
Well, that's
Thank
great.
you for your service to our country.
Well,
Nice talking again to you today on camera.
Because very few people know the story.
Oh, I'm a history buff. I minored in history, so. But Hank Alessio dropped an email to me to tell me the bus was going to be here. Then my daughter went by, saw it, she knows I'm a history buff, and immediately called me and said, "Did you know that bus was going to?" I said, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Now, did you see books about the POWs or?
Yeah, I actually probably have a couple of books that talk
about
specifically about POWs.
Because they're so rare. I mean, 80% of the people that come through have no idea that there are POWs here.
Right, right.
Because it's not in our history books and
Probably
not in our
even a higher
textbooks.
percent than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably high. Now, how did you get involved in this?
Craigslist.
Is that right?
We've been doing this for 7 years. The first 4 years, the director of the museum that I represent in St. Paul did the tours, and he came down with Lyme's disease. So I put an ad on Craigslist asking for someone with a commercial driver's license. Mm-hmm. I answered the ad. Turns out I have no family, no pets. I can be gone 6, 8, 10 months out of the year.
Do you have a background in history at all?
A minor from college and a history buff, but mainly a history buff. Yeah. So I just fit in what they were looking for.
Yeah, a lot of what I've read from a nonfiction point of view has been during World War II period. You know, like Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, No Ordinary Time. Outstanding book about the presidential
I love her
years,
writings.
Of Franklin and Eleanor's time in the White House. Just a perfect time, and how lucky and fortunate we are to have some of the things that are going on in our country now because of what they did during the war years. But yeah, I read a lot of books during that period and about that period, even fictional books about that period.
Could I ask you your name, sir?
It's Michael Porter.
Oh, and where do you live, sir?
Right here in Hopkinton.
Oh, how long have you been here in this town?
I've been here since '76.
Okay, and you're quite the history buff. I noticed that you're really got in the conversation with this young...
Yeah, just, you know, I'm interested in our country, and you need to know your history if you not want to know what your future's going to be.
The company stores the buses and maintains them for us.
That's nice.
And then the museum itself is in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh, cool. Cool, so you're from the St. Paul area.
Yeah.
Who takes care of the bus?
The Vanderhaeg Trucking Company in Spencer, Iowa. They're our ferry godfather. They maintain the buses, and then we store them when we're not on the road.
Well, let's take a walk inside the bus.
Sure. The panels on the right tell how the men were captured and brought here. The panels on the left tell what life was like in the camps, what the camps themselves were like. The director of our museum, Michael Lueck-Trams, lived in Germany for 8 years. He interviewed between 50 and 70 ex-German prisoners of war, and they gave him these artifacts during those interviews. The first case here are items the men had with them when they were captured. And then the rest of the artifacts in the cases are items they had with them in the camps themselves.
Who is this fellow here? He's the...
This is just before and after. His when he was captured, and then probably in the 70s or 80s as an ex-POW.
Oh, Arnold Kramer.
No, this is not Arnold Kramer.
Oh, I see. It's just a individual.
Yes.
Oh, this is the History Channel.
Yes, this is a History Channel documentary about the POWs. This is an excellent documentary. Again, one that we can't sell.
Okay, how about this one here?
This is what life was like in the camps. They put on plays, leisure activities, the life of Riley, basically, which is not bad. No prisoners of war have been treated so well before or since. The artwork they did, they had art classes, they had architecture classes, they did civics classes, engineering classes. They could get college credit when they got back to Germany. And then this panel also shows the art class. just about every camp in the country had a band. The YMCA, the Red Cross, and the Quakers would give the POWs instruments, and they would form bands, swing bands, popular bands, and symphony orchestras. Boxing team, soccer teams. This camp had a billiard table. It was not bad. This is for Camp Campbell in Kentucky. This stage rotated. It was two sets on the stage, so they could go from one scene to another without having to change the sets. And then
I see there's some money here too, huh?
The POWs were paid for their work, but they weren't paid in currency, American currency, because in case they tried to escape, they wouldn't be able to readily buy a bus ticket or a train ticket.
Right.
So they were paid in what they were called camp script. And that script could only be used at the camp that they were based at.
And these are different books, like.
We are a traveling library. We sell books. All our books deal with various aspects of World War II. They're all nonfiction, and almost all of them are first-person accounts of what the people went through during World War II.
What would you recommend that I procure today?
This book is the diaries and the journals of the German POWs, so this gives the most insight on what the POWs went through. This book is the story of the German American citizens who were put in internment camps. So the untold story is brought to life of that. This is a wonderful book. This gentleman, the author's father, was a professional baseball player. He was a guard at a camp in Ruston, Louisiana. He taught the German POWs how to play baseball.
Out of Hitler's reach. That sounds very interesting.
Well, this is our director of our museum, Michael Lewick Tram. This is his PhD thesis. He was a Quaker, and there was a Quaker boarding school in West Branch, Iowa. And the boarding school was closed for the 30s because of the Depression, but the Quakers knew that they had all of this land. So when the madness started in Europe, the Quakers rescued 186 refugees from the madness in Europe and brought them to the cornfields of Iowa. It's an interesting story. Being Quakers, it wasn't enough just to rescue them. They wanted to turn them into Americans. They taught them how to read, write, drive cars, go to job interviews, and taught them how to farm. And for the most part, the refugees were from Hamburg, Berlin, Vienna. They were urbanites, and here they were set down in the cornfields of Iowa. For some of them, it was the first time they'd ever seen a horse not attached to a carriage.
And some of them stayed here or came back.
Well, the refugees stayed. I mean, these were refugees. This is the story of refugees. But the German POWs all had to go back. The Geneva Convention stipulates that. And then once they were home, they could turn right around and come back to the United States. Of 380,000 approximately German POWs, between 30 and 35,000 came back to live here. So about 8% came back to live here. They liked America, they liked Americans, they made friends here, they wanted to come back, live their lives, raise families.
Well, it was very nice talking to you today, and it was very informative, and I want to thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you for your interest. We very much appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, we finished this video, and hope that you found it enjoyable, and historical, and entertaining, and look forward to another Veterans Corner video that we will be producing in the future months. Goodbye for now.